You know that feeling when you're walking down the street, headphones in, sunlight hitting just right, maybe a little wind in your jacket, and the perfect song comes on, like a track composed just for this exact moment? The beat lines up with your footsteps. The trees are swaying. Maybe there's a coffee in your hand. You catch your reflection in a window, and for a moment, everything aligns. You're not just a person going to work or running errands. You're a character. This isn't your life. It's a scene. That's main character energy. And it's not just a fleeting feeling anymore. Over the last few years, it's grown from a niche internet joke into a full-blown cultural identity. Not just a meme, not just a mood, a mindset. It's everywhere, especially on TikTok, where the term exploded in early 2020, right around the time the world ground to a halt, and everyone started spending a little too much time inside, both physically and mentally. People began documenting their days in short, dreamy clips, reading on the subway, sipping a glass of wine, while watching rain slide down the window, walking alone through golden hour city streets. They'd pair these shots with captions like, "Romanticizing my life," or "Main character vibes only." It was aesthetic, sure, but it was also kind of beautiful. And in the middle of a pandemic, when time felt fake and the future felt even faker, this tiny act of self-framing became a kind of survival tactic. If nothing else, we could be the star of something even if it was just a 15-second TikTok set to a Phoebe Bridgers song. There was something healing about it. For a while, main character energy was a way of reclaiming control, of finding meaning in the mundane. It told us, your life matters even when it feels small. You deserve to romanticize the grocery store, or that solo walk, or that moment of peace between Zoom calls. And for people, especially young people, who felt invisible in a chaotic world, framing life like a story felt like an act of empowerment, an emotional buoy in a sea of uncertainty. But like anything on the internet, things escalated quickly. Somewhere along the way, that soft, wholesome self-love energy started to harden. What started as gentle affirmation began to morph into a more egocentric outlook. It wasn't just, "I matter" anymore. It became, "I matter the most." And as the vibe shifted, so did the tone. We started seeing more posts with captions like, "Just remember, everyone else is a side character in your movie." People weren't just indulging in a little self-romanticization. They were building entire personal brands around being the star of the show. Confidence turned into entitlement. Quirkiness became curated. Individualism slipped into performative narcissism. That's when we entered the territory of what people now call main character syndrome. Now, to be clear, main character syndrome isn't a real diagnosis. You won't find it in a psychology textbook or the DSM. It's not a disorder, it's a behavior. A pattern, a cultural shift, but one that's becoming increasingly visible, especially online. Mental health professionals are definitely noticing it. In an article for Parents.com, therapist Dr. Melissa Robinson Brown explained that people who fall into this mindset tend to frame their lives in a way that elevates their experiences above others. They aren't necessarily trying to be selfish, but they can struggle with empathy. They unintentionally downplay other people's emotions. They're locked into their own narrative so tightly that they forget everyone else has one too. And the effects of that aren't just personal, they're societal. This shift toward hyper-individualism is baked into the psychology of how we see ourselves. Let's talk about the spotlight effect. It's a phenomenon in psychology that describes how people tend to overestimate how much others notice or care about what they're doing. You trip over your own feet in public and you're mortified, but chances are nobody saw. Or if they did, they forgot 5 seconds later. That disconnect between how much we think we matter and how much we actually do in any given moment is part of what makes main character syndrome so easy to fall into. Especially in an era where we constantly curate and share our lives for others to see. But the spotlight effect is only half of it. There's also the narrative bias, our brain's natural tendency to organize our experiences into storylines. We crave beginnings, middles, and ends. We want events to make sense, to connect, to lead somewhere. And when our lives don't follow that satisfying structure, it can feel like the story's broken. Or worse, like we're failing at our own narrative. So we start to fabricate one. Not out of malice or delusion, but because storytelling is how humans process meaning. And that's where social media becomes the perfect stage. Platforms like TikTok and Instagram reward us not for being ourselves, but for performing a better, more polished version of ourselves. Our feeds become highlight reels, mini documentaries about our personal brand. Every post, every story, every reel is a tiny episode in the ongoing show of me. And if you think about it, algorithms are basically casting directors. They decide which main characters get attention and which ones get buried in the feed. So we start playing the role harder, smiling wider, captioning deeper, romanticizing harder. And soon, we're not just living our lives, we're fictionalizing them. The New Yorker called it living as if. In their piece titled, "We All Have Main Character Energy Now," they describe how the internet has made it normal, even expected, to narrate your life like a character arc. Our heartbreaks become emotional climaxes. Our milestones become big screen moments. Our healing journeys get aesthetic B-roll. It's cinematic, yes, but it's also existentially exhausting. Because when your entire identity becomes a performance, where does the real you go? And this is where the danger creeps in. Main character energy, at first glance, feels harmless, even kind of charming. But when taken too far, it can create what psychologists call emotional solipsism. That's the belief that your internal world is the only one that really exists. That your growth, your feelings, your story is the most important thing in any room. Other people? Background characters. Friends? Plot devices. Partners? Emotional side quests. And when you stop seeing people as whole humans with their own arcs, their own conflicts, their own needs, you start treating them as disposable. So while main character syndrome might not be clinically diagnosable, its effects are very real, and they're affecting the way we communicate, connect, and even exist together. The problem isn't wanting to feel special. The problem is thinking no one else is. So, let's pause for a second and think about something bigger. What does it mean for a society when everyone starts seeing themselves as the lead role in their own movie? In a way, social media has hypercharged the main character mentality. It's not just about having a few solo moments on a random Tuesday anymore. With TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, it's about making every moment shareable and therefore worthy of being witnessed by an audience. In the early days of social media, people were content to share their lives with friends and family. It was more like a scrapbook. But now, social media has morphed into a stage for public performance. The world isn't just watching you, it's waiting for you to perform. And if you can't do that, if you can't project that effortless, cinematic energy, you risk getting lost in the noise. The stakes are high. Validation feels like the currency of self-worth. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok thrive on what I like to call the highlight reel effect. Think about it. When you scroll through your feed, you're not seeing an honest representation of anyone's life. You're seeing the best moments, packaged for maximum engagement. That sunrise walk with your dog? Beautiful, but not without a strategically timed photo. The perfect latte? Definitely edited to perfection, not to mention the angle you spent 5 minutes getting right. Even your friends' candid shots are often staged. Everyone is a director, and everyone's life is a carefully curated sequence of events. And here's the thing. We're all in on it. We know it's performative, but we also know that if we don't lean into the performance, we risk being overlooked. It's like an unspoken contract. You show up, you perform your role, and maybe you get a few likes in return. But there's a dark side to this collective performance. The line between authenticity and performance begins to blur, leaving us all wondering, are we living our lives or acting out someone else's script? That's where the tension comes in. When you spend so much time crafting a life that looks perfect for an audience, it's easy to lose track of what actually feels real to you. That's when you get trapped in this constant loop of proving you're the star of your own show. And if you're not careful, you might start to believe that the spotlight is something you deserve, and that it's everyone else's job to recognize that. And when we take a step back and look at how these platforms reward our most main character moments, we can see a deeper problem. The more relatable you are, the more attention you get. The more emotional vulnerability you share, the more the algorithm rewards you. TikTok, in particular, thrives on people sharing those raw, vulnerable moments, those seemingly authentic snippets of your life that make you appear real. But here's the catch. The more you perform vulnerability, the more you start losing track of what's real and what's just good content. It's a feedback loop of performative self-discovery. We've all been there posting a photo or video thinking, I look so cute today, I just have to share this. But then, when it gets a lot of likes or a lot of views, it reinforces that behavior. Validation becomes the goal. You're no longer sharing something that simply feels right. You're creating a narrative for an audience. And that's where the main character mentality takes on a whole new life. It goes from an internal feeling to an external performance. The problem? You begin to expect the world to revolve around you in real life, just like it does online. This can show up in your relationships, in your interactions with others, and even in how you process personal setbacks. If you're constantly expecting your life to be a movie complete with arcs, plot twists, and grand resolutions, then the absence of those things can feel like a failure. When your breakup doesn't lead to a dramatic makeover montage, or your career setback doesn't come with an emotional, soul-searching music cue, you feel robbed. Life's little disappointments start to feel like the plot is falling apart. Psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula talks a lot about modern narcissism in her work. But here's the twist. It's not about grandiosity or overt self-centeredness. It's about validation. We don't necessarily want to be the best or the brightest anymore. We just want to be seen. In a world where visibility equals value, being overlooked, whether by friends, family, or even strangers, feels like being erased. And if you've ever felt invisible, you get it. But there's something about this need to be seen that's a little off. Because while being visible does feel good, it doesn't always mean you're truly seen, not in the way that matters. True connection, true empathy, doesn't come from constantly being in the spotlight. It comes from sharing the space, seeing others for who they are, and stepping back when the world isn't just about you. Here's the ultimate irony. In the pursuit of being the main character, we forget that we're all living in the same movie. That means everyone else is the star of their own narrative too. And when you live life assuming that you're the only one with a significant plotline, you start seeing everyone else as extras, people who are there to support your story, to back up your plot. But that's where it all starts to fall apart. Because if we're all just playing our roles, who's actually living? So what if I told you that main character energy isn't all bad? That it actually has the potential to be a force for good, as long as we don't take it too far. Because here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with feeling like you're the star of your own story. In fact, it can be incredibly empowering. Think about it. There are times when stepping into your own narrative, when embracing that main character mentality can help you build confidence, set boundaries, and take ownership of your life in ways that you might never have before. Especially for people who felt invisible, sidelined, or dismissed, recognizing yourself as the lead character in your own film can be transformative. It's a kind of reclamation, a way of telling the world, I matter. I'm important. My story deserves to be seen. And sometimes, when you've been living on the sidelines, that belief can be the key to getting out of a rut, to taking control, to changing your life. For example, let's talk about boundary setting. When you start viewing your life as a narrative, you begin to realize that you're not just the star, you're the writer too. You can edit your story. You can choose who gets to be in it and who doesn't. You can decide where your plot is going, and if something or someone is no longer serving your story, you have the power to cut it out. And that's not just empowering, it's also healthy. It's a step toward taking control of your emotional landscape, making choices that protect your well-being, and not letting toxic dynamics dominate your life. And then there's the role of self-reflection. When you view your life through the lens of a narrative, you start to understand the lessons in your own experiences. That difficult breakup? It's a moment of character development, a turning point that pushes you toward growth. That struggle with your career? It's part of your underdog arc, your journey to triumph. And while this might seem a little corny, it can also help people make sense of their hardships and find meaning in pain. Life may not always hand us neatly packaged resolutions, but when we frame our struggles as part of a larger story, it gives us the courage to keep going. But, and this is important, there's a fine line between empowerment and narcissism, between self-love and self-obsession. And the key to walking that line is balance. Because the real power in embracing main character energy comes from understanding that your story isn't the only story. It's about finding the space to recognize that other people are living their own movies too. That just because you're the lead in your life doesn't mean you get to dismiss the experiences of others. The healthiest people, the emotionally grounded ones, know that they're important, but they also know that everyone else is important too. Their struggles are just as real. Their victories just as worthy of celebration. In her book, Don't You Know Who I Am? Dr. Ramani Durvasula highlights a crucial point about modern narcissism. It's not necessarily about thinking you're better than others. It's about the need for validation. Everyone is searching for recognition in a world that constantly demands more from us. And when we start believing that we're the only ones who matter, that need for validation becomes toxic. We start seeing others as background characters, not as people with their own needs, wants, and struggles. We forget to listen, to empathize, to share the spotlight. That's why it's so important to step out of the spotlight sometimes. To be able to acknowledge, even celebrate, that other people's stories are just as meaningful as yours. Because life isn't a solo performance, it's an ensemble cast. Imagine how different the world would be if we all operated with this balance. If we let ourselves shine, really step into our own power, speak our truths, and express our individuality, but also recognized when to step aside, when to give someone else the floor, when to see their journey as just as valid as our own. It would look like empathy. It would look like connection. It would look like true emotional intelligence. And here's the paradox. The most powerful main character moments are the ones where you realize you're not the only one. When you see yourself as part of a larger narrative, when you recognize that everyone has their own story, that's when you unlock something truly incredible. That's when you move beyond the shallow, performative aspects of main character energy and into the deeper, more meaningful version of it, the kind that allows for real growth, compassion, and understanding. So yes, it's okay to have those moments when you feel like you're walking down the street and the world is your movie set. Those moments of self-love, self-expression, and confidence are vital. But the healthiest way to embrace this energy is by stepping back and remembering that life isn't just about your plot. It's about the community of stories that surrounds you. And when you can do that, when you can love your own character while still honoring the narratives of others, that's when the real magic happens. Now that we've explored the complexity of main character energy and the fine balance required to embrace it healthily, let's talk about the final takeaway. Because here's the thing. At its core, living with a strong sense of self, acknowledging that you are, indeed, the main character in your life, isn't just a fun little cultural quirk. It's a form of emotional strength, a way to truly own your narrative and to find agency in a world that often feels overwhelming. But as we've seen, that power comes with a responsibility. The responsibility to be mindful of how your actions and mindset impact the people around you. Because once you start viewing life as an ensemble cast, you realize something crucial. The most meaningful stories aren't the ones told in isolation. The truly profound moments in life come from the connections we make, the relationships we nurture, and the understanding that everyone, not just you, is fighting their own battles, facing their own conflicts, and striving for their own resolution. To go a little deeper, let's talk about what it means to really live authentically in a world full of curated performances. You see, part of embracing main character energy healthily is acknowledging that the stories we share with the world are never fully authentic. Social media has skewed our perceptions of realness. The vulnerability we see online isn't always as raw as it appears. There's editing, there's filtering, and most importantly, there's an audience. We're constantly aware that our lives are being watched. So the real question becomes, how do we embrace who we are when the world constantly tells us how to be? The healthiest form of main character energy, then, isn't about pretending that everything in your life fits into a perfect plot. It's about accepting the messy parts. It's about showing up as your true self in all its imperfection and vulnerability, and then learning to embrace others in the same way. The key, I think, is understanding that self-worth isn't earned through validation from others. It's earned by being true to who you are, without needing the entire world to approve or applaud. It's when you realize that the true power of main character energy lies not in the applause, but in the quiet moments where you're unapologetically yourself, no filters, no scripts. And here's where things come full circle. When we lean into this kind of authentic main character energy, we begin to build genuine connections with others. We start to see people for who they truly are, not just as background characters in our story, but as fully realized individuals in their own right. We start to practice true empathy listening, understanding, supporting. And when you can do that, when you can hold space for other people's stories as much as you hold space for your own, you unlock something beautiful, a sense of collective belonging, where we all get to be the stars of our own stories without taking away from each other's narratives. And that's where the real transformation happens. It's not about becoming more of a main character. It's about becoming a better main character, one who understands the importance of stepping back, sharing the spotlight, and realizing that your worth doesn't diminish when others shine. In fact, it grows. So, yes, you can be the lead in your own movie. You can walk down the street with the sunlight hitting just right, your headphones on, and feel like you're part of something bigger. You can look at your life and recognize your growth, your triumphs, and your hard-fought battles. But remember, life isn't a solo performance. It's an ensemble cast. And the moment you start recognizing that, the more powerful your story becomes because it's not just yours. It's part of the collective human experience, one where everyone has a role to play and every story is worth telling. So, step into your main character energy. Own it. But also, remember that there's magic in letting others own their narratives too. Because when we all rise together, that's when we're truly living. And with that, we've come full circle. Main character energy, in its healthiest form, isn't just about the spotlight. It's about balance, empathy, and understanding the power of our shared humanity. Because when you truly see others as main characters in their own stories, that's when you get to live the most meaningful life of all. And that's the conclusion of our deep dive into the dark side of main character energy. Whether you've been living in the spotlight or learning how to step out of it, remember life is a journey, and we're all in this together. So, embrace your narrative, but never forget to honor those of the people around you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.